So this is called When Gods Walk the Sky, Rethinking Ancient Contact in Hellenic and Anatolian Lore. And so we're going to really deep dive into ancient Greek and Anatolian history and how that actually connects with extraterrestrial contact. Because I do think there is a connection. There's definitely a connection. So I want to give kudos to my chat GPT. Did some beautiful art. Yeah, beautiful. I can't take credit for it, but it seemed like it took the images out of my head, so I'm happy about that. So here's a question I think the ancients probably asked, and I think a lot of us are still asking it today. Were the gods of the ancient world visitors from the stars? And this is what we're going to try to attempt with this to answer with this presentation tonight. So here's a map of Greece and Anatolia. So we see Delphi, Ephesus, and Troy, and Göbekli Tepe, and all the major spots. And then we're going to Heraklion tomorrow. Woohoo, I can't wait for that. We'll talk a bit more about Heraklion in a few slides. So why is this region considered to be the cradle of myth, philosophy, and mystery? And Greece and Anatolia, which is also modern-day Turkey, acted as a cradle for myth, philosophy, and mystery traditions due to their position on the planet. So they were a high-traffic crossroads between the East and the West, and that was exactly what Neil was talking about. He said this area was exactly the defining point between Western Europe and West Asia. So a lot of different influences coming in here. And so they were fostering this unique fusion of Aegean, Near Eastern, and Egyptian ideas. And I know Neil in his presentation, I'm going to refer to his presentation here and there because he did bring up some good points about the Kush people coming from the south of Egypt, and then they moved into the Indus Valley, so that was really interesting. I didn't know that, so that was cool. So this region combined intense cultural, trade, and intellectual curiosity, which sparked a transition from mythical to rational thought. So like we said before, this is an intersection of civilizations. So the Aegean Sea served as this bridge between the Mycenaean and Minoan cultures of Greece, and also the ancient civilizations of Anatolia, which actually made up of the Hittites, the Phrygians, and Mesopotamia, and also as far away as the Indus Valley. So this was bringing in a lot of different ideas, technologies, and religious beliefs. And speaking of the Indus Valley, Neil, I do think there was a big influence from the Vega civilization in the Indus Valley. I do think a lot of the Hindu and Vedic ideas actually originated from the Vega system in Lyra, so just wanted to answer that question for you. And that's probably where the dark-skinned Indians got their dark skin from, was from the Vegans, because they were blue-skinned beings. And actually the Vegans, when they came to Earth, their skin they came as a blue-skinned being, but I think the more they were integrated into the denser Earth frequencies, their skin had a tendency to turn to brown. So it was kind of like India was an interesting mix of white Lyran and blue vegan genetics. So you probably have a little bit of both, I'm guessing. But anyway, I love Neil's presentation. It was really good. This was also the birthplace of philosophy. So the western coast of Anatolia, Ionia, was where Greek philosophy began with thinkers like Thales of Miletus. So living on the edge of the Lydian and Persian empires exposed them to diverse, non-mythical explanations of the universe. So this was starting to prompt a shift towards rational inquiry. So before, everything was kind of mythological, people told stories. But then when we start talking about Athens and the philosophies, all the philosophers of Athens, we'll get to that slide in a few, we're going to start seeing this shift from the divine feminine, kind of this interesting mystery flow of ideas into more rational thought with Pythagoras, which is, I think, another talk that Neil is doing pretty soon. So there's also cultural hybridity. So these were cultures that didn't cancel each other out, but they kind of merged together. So in Neil's presentation, he was comparing a lot of the Greek gods with the Hindu gods. And so you would see a lot of repetition of these gods throughout this region, even in places like Italy, Rome, and southern Italy also had a lot of these same gods. Maybe they just gave them different names, which we'll get into. So it's basically blending these local Anatolian cults with the Greek anthropomorphic deities. Also was a hotbed for mystery religions. This is also the birthplace of individualism and freedom. So this decentralized city-state polis structure of Greece, particularly in Ionia, created a free environment, allowing individuals to question existing myths and develop philosophies. But like Neil was speaking about earlier, before dinner, I actually don't think the idea of democracy originated from Greece. I think it was maybe expanded in Greece, and then it was brought over eventually to the United States during the founding days of the founding fathers and the liberation of the United States from Great Britain. But actually, the whole idea of democracy came from Lyra, and probably particularly the Vegan Lyrans, but that's a whole other conversation. And then we talked about local traditions and such as the flood myths. We hear a lot about the flood, the Great Flood. A lot of civilizations were wiped out during that time. That was later formalized into literary and artistic masterpieces that defined classical culture. So this had its influence amongst many other later cultures, such as the Roman Empire, maybe even Etruscan culture to a certain extent. So we talked about cultural cross-currents. I don't want to get too deep into this, but there was a lot of peaceful trade, colonization, and migration throughout the Aegean coast, which started in, they think, 7th century BC, which later intensified under Alexander the Great's conquests. So this fusion resulted from intermarriage, shared religious practices, and the gradual adoption of the Greek language by local populations. And so there's a lot of this repetition of language, and yes, I do believe that a lot of language came from maybe the West Asian location of planet Earth, but where did that language come from? And the download I got was that it actually came from Tamil, which was a pre-Sumerian language. So the Sumerians were in that West Asian culture. And the Sumerians got that language from who? The gods, extraterrestrial beings. Most of the language here on planet Earth is based from Tamil, which actually is a Lyran Pleiadian language. So it came from the Lyran and the Pleiadians. So a lot of these Greek religious cultures merged, and there was identified quite a bit with Greek counterparts, as Anatolian. So the temple of Artemis in Ephesus was supported, for instance, by the Lydian king Croesus. So by the 4th century AD, so a lot of changes were occurring during this time, Asia Minor became increasingly more and more Christian and Greek Orthodox. So this was we're starting to see the development of the Byzantine Empire. So this, alongside later Roman influences, reinforced the Asian minor Greek culture. So they, like I said before, they were kind of superimposed. So it wasn't like you had one conquering civilization come in and they wiped everybody else out. They weren't into that. They kind of liked what each other had to offer. So they just adopted, some of these gods and deities from other other cultures, more ancient cultures. So we're going to talk a lot about sky gods and their influences throughout mythologies. So these Hellenic sky gods that were led by Zeus, I think a lot of us know about Zeus, established this divine hierarchy, prioritizing cosmic law, order, and weather control. So as a supreme ruler, and I think I'm going to move over to the next slide. So as a supreme ruler, Zeus dominated the sky and storms. So he influenced mortal behavior and natural phenomena, while primordial deities like Uranus and celestial deities like Helios, which is the sun god, and Selene, or Selene, the moon goddess, they governed different factions of the atmosphere. So these sky deities were later adapted by the Romans. So Zeus, for instance, became Jupiter. Selene became Luna, influencing quite a bit of European literature, science, and cultural perception of the cosmos. So for many hundreds of years after the fall of the Roman Empire, and even after the fall of the Byzantine Empire, we still see this mythology permeate art and literature for many centuries afterwards. So this has had an outreaching effect on even our civilization today. So these sky deities, including wind gods like the Anemoi and the dawn goddess Eos, ensured that every aspect of the atmosphere was under divine command. That was making them crucial to Greek understanding of the world. So as we travel through these locations with the slideshow tonight, we're not only visiting physical archaeological sites, and these are a lot of these sites we're going to be visiting on this cruise, which is really exciting. We're also stepping into landscapes where the ancients believed that heaven and earth were directly connected. So we're here on this myth of memory of contact. So myths as encoded histories, they weren't just stories. A lot of us, I think, for a long time thought they were just made-up stories. You know, maybe the ancients were just trying to explain natural phenomena. So they attributed, these anthropomorphic beings, like, oh, let's make up a being, that controls the sky or something. But in ancient Greek mythology, the gods were not distant abstractions. They were physically descended to Earth and interacted with humans. So Zeus, for instance, was said to arrive in thunder and lightning. Apollo, as you can see over here, there's Apollo. He traveled in a radiant chariot across the sky, which is probably a starship, okay. And then Athena would just show up. She would just show up in moments of war, or maybe she'd show up when somebody needed some words of wisdom or some guidance, so she was just popping in and out. So many ancient cultures describe their gods as coming from the heavens, wielding extraordinary power, technology, and teaching their humans knowledge. So this would be astronomy, agriculture, architecture, and sacred law. Kind of sounds like ETs, right? So were these beings purely mythological, or could some traditions preserve memories of encounters with advanced non-human intelligence? So here's my galactic historical reference. So this is my interpretation, so you guys can take it or leave it. But when I connected with the Akashic records, so I've been getting a lot of downloads about this presentation. So I was asking, where did the Greek gods actually came from? And what I got a download about on the Akashic records is that they were part of a Lyran rogue group that escaped to Earth after many years of Lyran conquest. So because these were advanced humans, so they were humanoid beings, they were taller than probably average Earth humans, probably better looking, but they were still human, okay? They still had human foibles and failings. And so these beings, because of years of trauma and loss, they became somewhat corrupted. So they weren't entirely benevolent. So at this point, they were probably pissed off that, the Draconians destroyed their planets and they lost multiple battles. And so they wanted to find new worlds to conquer. So Earth looked like a pretty nice planet. Now, I do believe that, I know a lot of us know about the stories of these Greek sky gods that you see depicted here. They were constantly fighting against the Titans. Now, I do believe from my observation in the Akashic records that the Titans were likely reptilian hybrid beings. So these were beings that initially conquered the earth. So maybe this was during the time of the dinosaurs, so you had these reptilian hybridized beings that kind of took over Earth, and then the new faction came in and decided, you know what, you guys need to get out of here. We're going to take over from here. And the reason why I say this is because there was that famous story of Kronos, who I think was supposed to be the father of Zeus, who used to eat his children. Doesn't that sound like a reptilian thing to do? I mean, that's kind of crazy, right? Like, wow, that's like, why would anybody eat their own children? And so, of course, I think as the story goes, Zeus's mother, Rhea, decided, okay, I've had enough of my husband eating the children. I'm going to hide this bundle away and give him a rock. So he gobbled down a rock that he thought was Zeus, and then Zeus grew up and got in a big battle with Kronos and beat him and ran off the Titans. And so that was the beginning of the influx of the Olympian faction gods. Now, I thought another interesting story was the story of Prometheus. I don't know if you remembered, but Prometheus was actually, I think, a Titan, but he was kind of a good guy. He was a good guy. He actually had a lot of, I would say, empathy for Earth humans, and he was the one that brought fire to humanity. So I was like, well, okay, wow, Prometheus. He brought fire to the, and I remember with my Akashic research, and this has been something that's been downloaded to me, that it was the Lyrans that brought fire to Earth. So they brought the fire element to Earth. Was Prometheus actually from Lyra? I mean, was he a Lyran being that wanted to help humanity and then ended up getting badly punished? Like he went through horrific punishment. I think he had an eagle come and eat his liver every single day, and his liver would regrow because he was immortal. So he went through that every single day. So he was really trying to help humanity. I'm going to get into some Hellenic evidence. So we're going to start visiting some of these locations that we're going to be going to on this cruise. And one of my favorites is Delphi. So the Oracle of Delphi, the gateway to the gods. So the ancient Greeks actually believed that Delphi was the omphalos. It was the navel or center of the world. It was considered to be a place where the veil between the realms were thinner. So it was allowing this communication with the gods. So throughout Greek mythology, there was these kings and humans that would take a pilgrimage to Delphi to ask a burning question. They would always ask this question. But you know what? The Delphic oracles, they were kind of sneaky. They would give an answer that was true, but it could be easily misinterpreted. And we see this over and over again in Greek mythology, where maybe some king thinks, oh yeah, I'm going to win the war. The great civilization is going to fall, and then it was his own civilization that fell. So it was kind of like, ambiguous answers. So the Pythia, this was the priestess of Apollo, entered these trance states and would deliver messages that was believed to come from divine intelligences. So modern research actually has some theories around this. Why was this happening at this particular location? So they think that perhaps there was geologic gases that were rising through the earth that induced these altered states. And maybe it was just the placement of the temple and the sacred geometry they were using that was connecting them to these alternate realms. And maybe it was just a cultural expectation, like, okay, Apollo was considered to be the god of prophecy. So, okay, so of course, his priestesses have got to be prophets. And then from a cultural perspective, one might ask, were the oracles just interpreting messages from archetypal forces or from advanced intelligences beyond our world? Now, we all know what the answer is. Okay, we're going to get into that. So here's the galactic historical reference. So the download I got from the Akashic records, and like I said, this is just my interpretation, it was that Apollo and his twin sister Artemis, which we're going to talk more about Artemis, especially when we get to Ephesus, were likely Lyran Pleiadian beings who came to Earth to establish the divine feminine mysteries in this region. So we had all these city-states of Greece that were very patriarchal. So there was so the Pleiadians were considered to be representatives of the divine goddess feminine energies. So of course they were bringing this feminine energy to this region, probably to balance things out a little bit, because some of those city-state kings, they like to conquer and get into wars, and so there had to be some balance here. So Apollo, we mentioned him being the god of prophecy, but he was also the god of music, healing, and light, which all aligns beautifully with the Pleiadian star system, Merope. So the oracles of Delphi were likely channeling the Akashic records through a direct connection with the energies and the cosmic beings of Merope. Now, if you guys don't know about Meropean culture so the Pleiades is a cluster. There's a whole bunch of stars. And each of these star systems have their own civilization, their own focus. Merope was was a smaller system. It wasn't quite as prevalent as Alcyon or Taygeta, but it had its own purpose. So Merope was considered to be the masters of psycho-spiritual healing. So when I do Akashic readings for people that have a connection to Merope, oftentimes they end up going into psychology or psychiatry, or they're their counselors, or they do some sort of psychological work. Meropians were also masters of music, particularly music that was used for healing. And so there was these Meropian priestesses that were constantly channeling the Akashic records in attempts to help other beings heal. So more than likely, these oracles of Delphi were, and a lot of times they were very young girls. They would just pick somebody that I guess had a natural psychic talent and put her in the pedestal and just say, okay, start channeling. So they were actually connecting with these Meropian priestesses. So these places like Delphi remind us that the ancient world didn't just see the heavens as this distant, far-off place. So they saw the sky as being alive with presence and guidance and intelligence. Let's get to the next location. This is the place that we're going to be visiting tomorrow, which is Crete, Heraklion. And I think we go to Rhodes when tomorrow, or not tomorrow, but the next day or the following day. I think we get to Rhodes at some point. So Crete and Rhodes were considered the guardians of the ancient sea. So both of these were very ancient civilizations, even compared to some of the other city-states such as Athens. So the island of Crete was home to the Minoan civilization. And this was one of the earliest advanced cultures in Europe. So they were trade-based. So they had a trade-based economy. So they were a maritime civilization. Of course, they were on an island, so that makes sense. that served as a hub for trade. And they were actually connecting 3 continents, which encouraged the exchange of skill and knowledge. So they were connecting with Eastern, the Balkans, and then Western Europe, and then also West Asia and the Middle East. So there was also this cultural development. So the advanced art and architecture that was found in places like the Palace of Knossos. Is anybody else going on that tour tomorrow? I plan to. So yes, yeah. We're going to see some of these, I'm sure. So we're going to see this beautiful artwork that was, products of local genius, craftsmanship, and cultural evolution. So this was a civilization that came into prominence during the Bronze Age. So this is how ancient this civilization was. And as far as scientific origins, archaeological evidence does show that the Minoans were a Mediterranean people that originated actually from Anatolia. So at some point, they immigrated. Anatolian farmers probably immigrated to Crete and created a civilization there. So sites like the Palace of Knossos, which we're all going to see tomorrow, reveal this sophisticated society that's deeply connected to nature, symbolism, and sacred ritual. And many researchers believe that the Minoans had this really strong relationship with astronomy and celestial cycles, which influenced their architecture and mythology, which actually I think was influenced perhaps from the Antarian Stargate, which we're going to get into when we get into Göbekli Tepe. So we'll talk about the Antarian Stargate. Meanwhile, Rhodes, which is on this side of the image, stood as another great maritime power of the ancient world and was once home to the Colossus of Rhodes, which was actually one of the 7 wonders of the world. So here's your galactic historical reference, because I'm going to give you guys some answers. So there's some speculative theories that suggest that the gods of the Minoan and Mycenaean mythology might have actually been humanoid extraterrestrials, and they were described as giants with blonde or red hair who resemble the modern Nordic aliens. So when I hear Nordic, I'm like, okay, tall, blonde hair, red hair, all sounds like Lyra. Okay, Lyran humanoids. We're not talking about the Lyran cat beings, although I did hear on your tour today there was a lot of cats. So, yeah, I think Dr. Judy was telling me about the cats. I was like, oh, darn it. I said, I wanted to go. I wanted to pet some cats, so connect with the real Lyrans. Yeah. So this is also the home of the myth of the Minotaur. Now, we all know about the Minotaur, the half-man, half-bull, a creature that was hidden in a labyrinth. And there's a whole story behind it, which I'm not going to get into, but you guys can look it up. But it actually I do believe the Minotaur might have had an ancient connection with the constellation Taurus, which is where the Pleiades and other star systems, such as the Hyades, Aldebaran, and also Apollonia, etc., are located. So the Minotaur, the man-bull hybrid, I think, and this is just my interpretation, might have been one of several hybrid creatures that was created during the Atlantean drive of genetic manipulation. So during the Atlantean times, the Atlanteans kind of went hogwire with GMOs and genetic manipulation, and they created all kinds of monstrous beings, mixed man, animal beings like the Hydra and like the Chimera. I mean, we talk about all these different beings, where they come from, were they real? Yes, they were real. Okay, they were fallouts from Atlantis, is what I think anyway. The whole story of Theseus killing the Minotaur might have been more of an allegory. So this was an allegory of the rise of Mycenaean power. So the Mycenaeans actually came from mainland Greece, and they were starting to come into power, and this was a more patriarchal civilization. So they wanted to take over the long-standing Minoan rule. So this was, which represented the rise of patriarchal cultures over ancient divine feminine bull cults. So again, they were letting go of the old, they were moving into new. Now, the Colossus of Rhodes was a gigantic statue of the Greek god Helios, and this thing was huge. I mean, it looked exactly like that, maybe, or similar to that. And this was the god of the sun, and it was considered to be one of the original Olympian gods, along with the moon goddess Selene. As mentioned earlier, these gods were likely Lyran rogue beings who escaped to Earth after the Lyran Wars. But what happened to the Colossus, I think there was an earthquake and it just snapped. It snapped, I think, on the knees, and then it fell, and they were never able to recover it. But for ancient people to create something like that makes me think that they used some extraterrestrial technology. There is no way they could have propped something up that big or even create something that big. So I'm thinking there was extraterrestrial technology involved, and then when it got destroyed, they didn't have the technology anymore to repair it. So for many people, like myself, places like Crete and Ephesus carry a deep resonance, as though something ancient in our memory recognizes them. So how many people here really connect with the Minoan culture? I really do. I do. Thank you, Susan. Yeah, I do. I feel like I probably had a past life there. I remember as a kid seeing the images of the bull leaping with the young people that were leaping over the bulls, and I thought, oh yeah, I think I've seen that. I've seen that in a past life. Hey, moving along to Mount Olympus. Now, Debbie asked me a really interesting question yesterday about Mount Olympus, and I'm going to talk about some answers through that here. So in ancient Greek belief, Mount Olympus was not just a mountain. It was considered the dwelling place of the Olympian gods, which was led by Zeus. Now, the summit was believed to be hidden by clouds, inaccessible to ordinary humans, reinforcing this idea that it was this realm between worlds. And I remember yesterday saying it was a portal, which that's basically what a portal is. It's a realm between two different dimensions. So many ancient cultures actually placed their gods on high mountains. I think this is true of even some of the Indus mythologies as well, like a lot of their gods lived in the mountains, which symbolizes this connection between earth and the heavens. So from this symbolic or even speculative perspective, mountains like Olympus could have served as sacred contact zones. So it may have been a landing zone for maybe extraterrestrial starships. We see this even in the Nazca lines in South America. So they created these places where these ships can land. Now, here's the galactic historical reference for Mount Olympus. So it was the highest peak in Greece and the mythical home of the Greek gods. And it was often featured in these ancient astronaut theories, which proposed that the deities were actually extraterrestrial visitors. I think we all kind of figured that out. So they suggested that maybe these gods were actually aliens interacting with humans. So they were using Mount Olympus as their landing base. And some interpretation of ancient myths described the temple of the gods atop Mount Olympus as this shining palace, which some proponents suggest it was probably likely an alien spaceship that would lift off. So that's why it was so shiny. So the constant cloud cover, and in myth, the mysterious, often inaccessible nature of the summit was kind of a concealed base. So it was just this hidden place where, and we see this even in UFO lore today, that a lot of starships or UFOs you might see them as cloud ships, or they might be hidden in these lenticular clouds. We see this a lot, usually around mountains. I know we see it in Colorado quite a bit. So this is an interesting literal twist. So Olympus Mons, which is actually a mountain on Mars, the largest volcano in the solar system, is named Olympus. So it's linking this mountain with the one in Mars. So there's a little connection there. So for the ancient Greeks, the gods weren't just these distant abstractions. They just lived among the clouds on Olympus. They were watching humanity, guiding events, and sometimes deciding they wanted to walk among mortals, kind of like extraterrestrials today. All right, this is when things get a little more patriarchal. So Athens was considered to be the cultural center of ancient Greece and home to the Acropolis. I think some of you had the tour of the Acropolis at night, I think, and we're going to do another tour there when we get back. So this was a sacred hill that was dedicated primarily to Athena. So the Parthenon symbolized a Greek reverence for wisdom, strategy, and divine guidance. So Athens also produced some of the greatest philosophers in history. So these were people that were asking questions, profound questions, about the nature of the cosmos and our humanity's place in it. So these thinkers like Plato, Socrates, maybe some of the literary giants like Homer, helped to shift humanity towards a deeper understanding of astronomy, philosophy, and the structure of reality. Now, my take on Athens and on Athena in particular is I do think she was one of these original Lyran extraterrestrial beings that was guided to help. And she probably became warlike because of constant wars with reptilians. So she became very well versed in fighting and war tactics. But at the same time, she was also a goddess of wisdom, which seems like a dichotomy. And so you have to keep in mind that these extraterrestrial beings were not perfect beings. They had their own dysfunction, their own failings. Like I know with some of the myths of Athena, sometimes she can be very benevolent, sometimes she could get angry and turn her. I'm thinking about Medusa, where Medusa originally was the priestess of Athena who got raped by Poseidon, and then Athena got mad at her rather than at Poseidon and turned her hair into snakes, which turned her into a monster, in other words, which that's a whole other analogy in itself, one I want to explore one of these days. So what did that represent? So this became the place where humanity was starting to rationalize and starting to use scientific thought through understanding the cosmos itself. And so we're starting to have this bridge between mythology and philosophy. And like I said, even though there is supposedly an Arcturian ship called the Athena, I don't think Athena herself was an Arcturian being. She was too humanoid looking, so I honestly think she was probably one of that original Lyran rogue group. Okay, this is one location that we unfortunately won't have time to visit on our tour, but I did want to showcase it because of its cosmic connections. So this was considered also to be a gate to the underworld, and there was also Ephesus, which was the temple of Artemis, which we'll talk about. But in this slide, I'm bringing up Göbekli Tepe. So these were astronomical markers that suggested star wisdom. So Göbekli Tepe in southeast Turkey dates around 96,000 BCE. So this makes it one of the oldest known monumental temples complexes on Earth. This actually predates Stonehenge by 6,000 years. This is how old this place is. and the Egyptian pyramids by 7,000 years. So the T-shaped pillars in this location are carved with animals, celestial symbols, and abstract motifs that some researchers may represent constellations or cosmic events. So this suggests that the builders of this location probably possessed some very sophisticated astronomical knowledge, far earlier than what our current scientists and historians think. So this challenges our understanding of early civilization. So how did people at the dawn of agriculture was able to build not just this massive monument, but have this advanced symbolic knowledge of the heavens? Where did they get this information from? So here's my galactic historical reference. So I do believe that the alignment of Göbekli Tepe, because of its location in Anatolia, and I don't know, I was looking into records, so I have this whole kind of map in my head of, okay, which extraterrestrials visited which part of Earth. And I knew for some reason that Anatolia in particular was very heavily influenced by Ontarian mantis beings who visited and colonized the Anatolian regions during ancient times on Earth. So what was Antares? Antares is a star in the constellation of Scorpio. It's actually located pretty close to what we consider to be galactic center in our galaxy. Now, it's considered to be one of two major stargates. So it is the stargate that actually connects the Andromeda Galaxy with the Milky Way. So it's a very important stargate. A lot of higher dimensional energies coming through there. Now, the other major stargate in our galaxy is Arcturus. I think a lot of us know and love Arcturus. It's the gateway of souls, is where souls go after they pass away and they get prepared for their next incarnation. So this was likely a stargate. So it's likely maybe connecting people with the stars, not just physically, but maybe even interdimensionally. So I do believe it was a representation of that original Ontarian stargate. So I don't think this was just a temple that was inspired purely by human observations of the sky. I think it was likely, probably, it was either built by extraterrestrials or perhaps humans built it, but with help from extraterrestrial technologies. So, yeah, very interesting place. Another one of my favorite, I like all the places with the divine feminine, so I've always had this fascination with Ephesus, and I know that's going to be one of our spots, and we're going to have this awesome excursion. Can't wait, and hopefully we'll get to see some aspects of the original temple of Diana or Artemis. So Artemis of Ephesus was considered to be the cosmic goddess. So in a lot of ways, even though she was named Artemis, she was very different from the Greek huntress Artemis. So she was more like a cosmic mother goddess. So she represented the highest aspects of the divine feminine. So she was associated with fertility, with the stars, and with the cycle of nature. So a lot of these ancient temples, and we see this all throughout the world. I mean, there's temples even in South America, and the Inca temples, and the Aztec temples, and the Mayan temples, that all seem to be aligned with some astronomical star or constellation. So this was another one of these temples that was carefully aligned to celestial events. So it was linking sacred architecture with the movements of the heavens. And this was a very important location during ancient times. There was many devotees of this mother goddess that would make pilgrimages to this location. And they even talked about it in the New Testament. They talked about Ephesus. It was such an important location. And this was before Christianity was really starting to take off. So these priestesses of Artemis, they served as guardians of sacred knowledge, participating in rituals that honored the connection between Earth and the cosmos. So here's our galactic historical reference. So this temple, just like the Colossus in Rhodes, was considered to be one of the seven wonders of the ancient world. This was how magnificent this temple was. I mean, it looks kind of boring now, but back in the day, it was all painted very beautifully. The statue of Artemis was, I mean, massive, and it was all painted, with gold and silver, and she had, I don't know, multiple breasts representing fertility, I guess. So it was really quite a sight. So these high energy sacred sites were intended for or built in response to alien contact. So there was a reason why they were building these temples in these certain locations, because these were areas where they were known to have extraterrestrial contact. And so there was some interpretation of religious texts that mention angels or stars, such as in the book of Enoch or Ezekiel. This is in the Bible. So this is interpreted by alien hypothesis as description of celestial beings or extraterrestrial visitors. So in reference to this, all throughout the Bible, there was quite a few stories of certain individuals that were being visited by angels. And I think a lot of us probably have suspected by now that maybe they weren't angels, but they were probably extraterrestrial beings that maybe decided to help them. Now, the mythology and misinterpretation of this is that Diana, and some people think that Diana, Artemis, and all ancient gods were just myths that were created to explain natural phenomena, and that the fallen image was likely a sacred meteorite. So the whole story of this location was that there was a meteorite that fell. So they think this Diana statue was actually a meteorite that the Ephesians worshiped because it came from the sky. They didn't know where it came from. It was like, okay, it must be a god. And then they later integrated it into the cult of the goddess. So if the ancients saw gods as beings connected with the stars, could temples like this have served as places where humanity sought guidance from the greater cosmic family? Okay, so this is what we all came for, right? We all are initiates into this modern mystery school, which has been modeled from not just the ancient mystery schools here on Earth, but also the Sirian mystery schools from Sirius A. So this is a long-standing tradition of cosmic intelligence, cosmic information that didn't just come from here on Earth, from the great minds here on Earth, but also it came from the stars, from our star ancestors. So we're going to talk about the mystery schools and star wisdom. So this is depicting some of the mystery school initiates learning to commune with higher intelligence. So even back then, there was many people that wanted to connect with these extraterrestrial beings. So there were secret rituals that were used as technologies for altered states and insight. And they used a lot of sacred geometry, which we're going to get into in the next slide. So this was considered to be the language of the cosmos. So this was the beginning of bringing in mathematics, which brings in Neil's favorite person, Pythagoras. So we got Pythagoras and the illusion procession. So I don't want to take away Neil's thunder, because I know he has a whole presentation planned with Pythagoras, who is an amazing individual. I kind of liken him to similar to Nikola Tesla in our era. So Pythagoras lived in 570 to 495 BCE. So this was quite a while ago. It was before the time of Christ. So he was a philosopher, a mathematician, and a founder of a mystery school-like community. His teaching was esoteric, so it was only for initiates. So Pythagoras believed all is number. Well, isn't that the language of the universe? It all boils down to number. So this is where where sacred geometry comes from. So reality, in other words, is structured through mathematical patterns. And geometry is the language of the cosmos. So if you go beyond the human form, if you go beyond physical forms, you'll see that that everything is based on sacred geometry. So there was three concepts that Pythagoras came up with. There was a tetrastix. I hope I'm pronouncing that. The tetrastix. Tetris. Yeah, thank you. Can't pronounce that for some reason. So this is a triangle actually made of 10 points, and it's represented as the structure of reality. It's seen as sacred, and it was used a lot in initiations. There was also, number 2, the music of the spheres. So planets produce harmonic frequencies. Now, I don't know if you guys ever seen these tuning forks that are aligned with planetary frequencies. I used to have a Native American teacher that had a whole set of these. So she had like tuning forks that were aligned with Mars, some that were aligned with Venus and with Jupiter, which I thought was really kind of cool. So there is harmonic frequencies with planets. And the universe is kind of like a cosmic symphony, and harmony is the order of the universe. So this was like teachings that Pythagoras was teaching that was way ahead of his time. Geez. So geometry was this divine blueprint. So this was when they were starting to look at shapes like triangles, circles, ratios, which was reflected in nature, architecture, and celestial movement. So Pythagoras taught that the universe itself was structured through harmony, number, and geometric order. So to him, mathematics was not just a tool, it was a sacred language. It was a way of understanding the intelligence behind creation. So some might say that this knowledge felt received, like the structure of the cosmos was finally being revealed to humanity. So to bring in the extraterrestrial theme here, so obviously these ancient people, even though they were from ancient times, these weren't primitive people. They were super intelligent, actually. So they've gotten downloads of knowledge, probably inspiration from higher intelligence, and geometry as a universal language that was possibly shared across many civilizations, not just Greek civilization. So my interpretation is that I do think Pythagoras downloaded this mathematical information from extraterrestrial beings, much like Nikola Tesla downloaded advanced technology from the Venusians. Let's get into the illusions processions. So this is going to emphasize more the ritual and initiatory side of the mystery schools. So this is on this side of this slide. So this torchlit procession gave the sense of mystery, transformation, and sacred pilgrimage. So what was the illusion mysteries? So this was a sacred initiation rites that was, I think, 13 miles from Athens. So Eleusis wasn't that far from Athens. And it was dedicated to Demeter, who is the goddess of agriculture, and Persephone, her daughter, who went into the underworld. So this is the journey into the deep, dark aspects, which I know Phil Gruber is going to get into, and also I think Laura Eisenhower is going to talk about that more. I'm just going to give a little overview of that. So this was practiced for nearly 2,000 years. So this is how old these processions were. And much like some of our secret societies today, participants were sworn to secrecy. So to this day, we still don't know exactly what happened during these processions. So these initiates would walk from Athens to Eleusis, and this usually took place at night. They would carry torches, and they would reenact Demeter searching for Persephone. So what was this the symbolism of? It symbolizes the journey from darkness to light, ignorance to knowledge, death to rebirth, separation, reunion. It was an initiation also into higher knowledge. Participants experiencing something transformative, possibly altered states, visions, profound spiritual insight. And this was participated by thousands of people, so it was very popular back in that time. So some of the speculative connections, so this is, we're getting into some of the historical, galactic historical references, is that likely Demeter and Persephone were not just mythological figures. I know we've said that a lot, but they were probably advanced extraterrestrial beings who introduced agriculture, technology, wheat to humanity. So the humans here on Earth had to learn agriculture from somewhere. And where did they likely learn it from? From the Lyrans. The Lyrans, humanoids in particular, were considered to be masters of agriculture. They were predominantly an agricultural civilization. That's why they didn't develop the technology that they needed when they got into these wars with the Draconians, which led to their downfall, because they were focused mostly on agriculture and on living in these paradise planets. So these were probably likely beings, probably these feminized beings that came and shared this information with humans. So this is kind of interesting. I wanted to bring this up because I think this mirrors what a lot of us do today. So these initiates of these processions would drink the sacred portion called Kykeon. So they don't think this was just a ceremonial brew, but it was probably a psychoactive substance, maybe similar to ayahuasca, that potentially contained ergot, which was a fungus related to LSD, that allowed initiates to perceive other dimensions or receive knowledge from higher beings. Kind of sounds like what we do today. So initiates often reported having life-altering visions and losing the fear of death, which some fringe interpretations suggest it was more of a direct, technologically induced mental connection with extraterrestrial consciousness rather than just a religious experience. And then they were using a lot of blinding lights, and maybe there was a lot of light that was used during these rituals, which they think maybe there was some advanced technology that was being used, like maybe holographic projectors or spacecraft landings. So they think maybe it wasn't just torches, maybe they were bringing in actual technology. So I think it's kind of interesting that they were doing this even back then. They were trying to connect with something. And maybe this was their way of doing shadow work or going into the deeper mysteries. Okay, we're almost at the last slides here. Okay, I'm not going to spend too much time on this one, but I just wanted to illustrate kind of the modern parallels. So ancient encounters, modern interpretations. So on the left, the ancient world, we see these celestial beings, winged messengers and flying chariots, like those associated with figures of Apollo or Hermes. And on the right, we're seeing the modern era. So there's this similar phenomena through the lens of space flight and extraterrestrial contact, UFO craft and luminous beings. So across thousands of years in human history, people have described encounters with radiant beings. I know I've had a couple of those myself that descended from the sky. The language changes, the imagery changes, and the core experience often sounds remarkably similar. So I've done thousands of Akashic readings, and I would say that probably 40% of my clients have had similar experiences to what I've had. And I know probably some of you here in this room have had similar experiences. So this is still going on even today. So even back in ancient times, we're having interaction with extraterrestrial beings, and we are having those even now. I like this slide. It kind of reminds us of us. So, and the next one does too, or actually the one after that. So if the gods were ETs, how does this reshape our understanding of ancestry and destiny? Did contact accelerate civilization's growth, philosophy, and spirituality? Or are myths metaphors for our own latent divine potential? I would say the answer is yes to all of that. I want to do just a little activation for 5 minutes, so I'm going to go into this next slide. We're going to have the musical stylings of Rob with Lions of Lyra, speaking of Lyra. So I just want to get you guys all comfortable, kind of settle in. Yeah, 5 more minutes. Yeah. Yeah. So I want us all to really dive in deep into ourselves and think about our journey together during this time here in beautiful Greece and Turkey. So for just a moment, I would like to invite you to close your eyes if you feel comfortable doing so. Take a slow breath in and gently release it. Take another slow breath in, gently release it. Take one more breath in and release it. Imagine yourself standing beneath the same night sky that the ancients once gazed upon thousands of years ago. The temples, the mountains, the sacred landscapes of Greece and Anatolia are all around you. Above you, the stars shine with quiet brilliance, the same stars that guided the philosophers, the priests, and the mystery school's initiates. And as you look up, imagine a gentle light descending from the cosmos, a presence of wisdom and guidance. Perhaps these were the beings our ancestors once called the sky gods, the sky teachers. Allow yourself to feel a sense of connection, not just with the stars above, but with the ancient places we will soon visit together. Because the mystery of those ancient encounters does not just belong only to the past. In many ways, the story continues through each of us. And the same stars that inspire the ancients still shine above us tonight. I invite you to open your eyes, get back into your space, and come back to the room. And we're going to close out this presentation. So we're now here at the return of the star teachers. And who are the star teachers? It's all of us here in this room tonight. Thank you all for being here. The ancients believed that the heavens were alive with intelligence. Today, many of us feel that connection returning. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not whether the star teachers once visited Earth, or whether we are now ready to remember who we are and reconnect with the cosmos once again. Thank you, all of you, for attending. This was amazing. Thank you so. You guys have been amazing. Thank you so, so much.